This is Fragmented, an Android developer podcast where we talk about building good software and becoming better Android developers. I'm Don Felker, and this week, Kaushik's in California talking to a whole bunch of really smart folks at Google I.O. I wish I could have made it, but unfortunately, I had to hang back here in the Garden State and enjoy some beautiful weather while you guys had fun over at Google I.O. Kaushik takes the time to interview all kinds of individuals at Google I.O. and ask them a bunch of interesting questions. We hope you really enjoy this show. So Kaushik, take it from here.
All right, so I have made the holy pilgrimage again to I.O. 2016. Let's see how many Android devs I can catch this fine morning. Oh, and Sarah, sorry in advance for some of the processing you'll have to do.
How you doing?
Pretty good, how are you?
Pretty good, thank you.
All right, I am with the amazing Annyce, formerly known as the Groovy Gal. Is that correct, Annyce?
If you say so.
So why don't you tell us who you are, where you work, and what do you do?
Sure. So I'm Annyce. I work as an Android developer for a startup called Offgrid Electric, and we help power homes in Africa with solar energy.
If you folks want to hear more about Annyce, we had her on the show. We were lucky to have her on the show. It was episode 33, I think, if I'm right. Show notes, always have a look at the show notes for the right information. Okay, so as an Android developer, what did you think was the most exciting announcement that you heard here at I.O.?
The most exciting thing to me was the test recorder that will automatically write your espresso test for you.
Yeah.
And I like to call it no more excuses. So write those tests.
Hashtag no more excuses. That's the feature that's winning. Okay, I like that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a bunch of other random questions. Fragments, yay or nay?
Maybe, I would say. It depends on the use case. I think they can be valuable, depending on the circumstances.
But you're not against fragments. So if you found a situation where you would have to use fragments, you're cool using it.
Yeah, I'm definitely cool with it.
So what was the last Android application that you used on your phone that you remember just blowing your mind?
I really like Fitbit. I thought the onboarding was really nice, and they did a great job with sort of like the progressive reveal of the data. Mm-hmm. So, thumbs up to the Fitbit team. All right, Fitbit. So I should probably use that. As you can see, I'm not a user of those applications, but maybe if the Android application is good enough, I'll deal with this whole getting fit thing. If you had to start an app from scratch, what are three external dependencies in your application that you absolutely cannot live without? First, retrofit. So I like to interact with the network. Mm-hmm. Next, I really like Dagger. So I think it just does a really great job with dependency injection. And then finally, I would say JUnit, because you got to write those tests. I love those three dependencies. So when you actually code, when you build your application, do you listen to like white noise or do you listen to music? How do you actually code? So I use like Beats headphones that have the noise canceling thing. Yeah. So sometimes I just will listen to that only. And then depending on what I'm coding and like I want to get really like hyped, then I might listen to some music. But I try not to listen to anything that would cause me to like break out in Beyonce and get completely distracted. So yeah. I do that all the time. My Beyonce moves, I will tell you. So what's one cool Android Studio shortcut that you think our listeners should definitely know about? I think using column selection mode. So I like to use like Alt and like the up and down arrow keys to select multiple columns and change things. It's super useful, and I probably use it at least like every other day when I'm coding. Awesome. Can you remember the last bug or sort of like Android related ordeal that you had to deal with? I was writing some tests with Espresso, and I was trying to test intents, and it was just behaving really, really oddly. And so, I reached out to a couple of people, and actually it was just sort of something they had missed in the platform, which was great because I can help make other people's lives easier. And then I also figured out, why the issue wasn't working for me. So if there was one thing you wish Android had,
what would that be?
I wish they had unified code coverage reports. So I tend to use multiple flavors in my applications. And now I'm even using flavor dimensions. So it'd be great to see the code coverage for everything just in one place out of the box.
Awesome, Annyce. Thank you so much. And I hope you have an amazing rest of the Google I.O.
Thanks. Same to you.
You also happen to be a GDE.
That's right.
But for our listeners, can you tell us who you are, where you work?
Yeah, sure. My name, and it's a difficult one. It's Wiebe Elsinga. I'm a Dutch guy living in the Netherlands. I'm currently an Android lead developer for a small company and enjoying the sun currently.
That's true. There's also another interesting thing. I noticed you're also into MMA. Tell us more about that.
Oh yeah. So besides the struggle I have currently on a day-to-day basis with Android, I like kicking people in the nuts and really going all out. So it's a good stress relief.
Okay. Is Android development the relief, or is MMA the relief to Android development?
Oh, good question. I think it's both. I think it's a good balance between fighting in a cage and fighting on your computer.
Okay. So what's the most exciting announcement that you heard today?
Oh, it's definitely going to be the recorded testing, and really looking forward to giving it a try. And I'm a little bit afraid that's not going to be as good as we're hoping, because of if you see the previous ones, generating code is a bad thing to do.
Right.
But I'm really looking forward to that one. And instant run might be interesting to reach more audience for your app.
My sentiments are pretty much the same with the automatic espresso. I guess they said it was espresso testing.
It is espresso. Yeah.
So my sentiments exactly like when you have code that's generated, well, is the code going to be as good as probably what you would write? Like those are some apprehensions that we have. So
yeah, and the cool thing about espresso is it is readable, and especially if you use frameworks or like writing down in Cucumber style, given them when will it uphold that same structure? It's going to be interesting to see these upcoming weeks how it will evolve.
Fragments, yay or nay?
Yeah.
I didn't quite catch that. Is that a yay or a nay? That was amazing. That's basically both and none.
It can be good as long as you know how the reason behind the use of fragments. So if you want to have a separation for your UX or your UI, fragments can be helpful. But there are a lot of boilerplate and stuff you need to take care of yourself to actually make it good and perform well. And so it's still
So if you were starting a new Android application, what are 3 libraries, 3 external dependencies that you would absolutely add into that project?
I will probably use Dagger too. I'm really into the reactive coding currently, so RxJava or the new one that is currently being developed by Google. It looks promising. So probably use that one, but see what works for you. It all depends on the app you're using or trying to create. It should it's not only the user experience, but the developer experience as well. As long as it takes away the pain, you can use the library, and as long as you keep in mind that you're not bound, or your app isn't going to be 46 megabytes, it's fine.
Fair enough. Android Studio, do you use the Canary build, developer build, stable build?
I think if you would ask that to every developer, they should be using both.
Okay.
So the stable one for the more productive and currently in production applications, but you need to try out the Canary one as well to know what's going on in the Android world. So I have both.
Makes sense. And along those same lines, what's one Android Studio shortcut that you feel that most developers should be using that you think is amazing?
Command-Shift-T. I think that's one. It's so creating tests.
Oh, nice one. Yeah,
Everybody, I know for an Android developer, making test classes and adding functional or technical tests to your app isn't the most sexy thing, but it is important, especially if your app is growing a functional size. It is important to know that if you change or do refactoring or adding a new feature, that the app is still doing what it's supposed to be doing.
100% agreed. Do you listen to like music, any like white noise or something when you actually code?
It depends on the process. So when I'm designing, I like to listen to classical music.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but if I'm actually want to code crush, I do love Metallica, and I will go all out.
Any recommended Metallica song?
No, all are good.
All of them are good. Okay, great answer. Okay, so what's the last bug or like ordeal that you remember like as being an Android developer?
So I played a lot with vector durables, and I was looking how to incorporate the default XML representation of vector durables combined with state, so crash state or enabled state.
Right.
So I'm still struggling with that. But a good friend of mine, Mark Allison,
smart chap.
Yeah, he gave me a good pointer, so I still need to look into that.
Okay, perfect. And to close out, what's one thing you wish Android had but doesn't?
Good implementation documentation compared to the documentation on how to design. So there's a lot of efforts went into the documentation for material design and all the patterns, and but there's a big gap between how it's supposed to do and how you implement it. And there are some sites and some libraries that you can use, but still like the default how to, it's sometimes a hassle.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing rest of the I/O. Hopefully the weather gets a little better in the next 2 days.
Well, I come from Holland, so everything above 10 is for me an adjustment.
Fair enough. Thank you so much, Reed.
My pleasure.
I want to start off by saying I'm a big fan of your work. When I started off Android right from the beginning, I used your blog almost like a reference for like some of the things that I need to know. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. For our listeners, can you just give us a quick intro, who you are, what you do, etc.?
Sure, and you're too kind. I'm Mark Allison. I'm a freelance Android developer. I've literally just started a contract position with American Express, and I'm working with your co-host Don. So yeah, I've literally only just started there, but thoroughly enjoying it so far. And of course, I write a blog styling Android.
What was the most exciting announcement that you heard as an Android developer here at I/O today?
Without doubt, it has to be that they've killed off that really ugly Firebase logo. The new one is much nicer. There's a number of, you're being serious for a second, there's been a number of really exciting things. I think the test recording is really going to be make writing tests easier. The instant install is pretty good. There's a few things that are going to be, quite important.
Fragments, how do you feel about them? Yay or nay?
Yay under duress. I think they're a necessary evil at the moment, mainly because they serve a job if you do them right. They're a good way of encapsulating behavior and keeping it separate from UI, but they don't tie in well enough with activity life cycles and things to really make them as powerful as they could be, or as well integrated as they could be.
If you were starting an application from scratch, what 3 external dependencies would you absolutely put into that application?
I'm going to give a really non-committal answer here because I firmly believe that you need to understand your problem domain before you start choosing the tools that you're going to use to solve that problem domain. If you take the approach that you just have some tools that you're going to use regardless of what, you actually develop a mentality that you treat every problem as a nail if you only have a hammer.
That's an interesting answer, but under duress.
Am I allowed to say the material support library?
Sure.
You absolutely need that these days. If you're starting a greenfield project, there's absolutely no reason not to use it. Then it does become a little bit grayer. I'd probably, if you're asking me for 3 that solve really low-level problems, I think they're the easier ones. Logger, for example, to actually make your logging easier. And probably the third one, I think would be, it might change soon because of some announcements this morning, but Crashlytics would be another.
Ooh, yeah.
Because if you don't know what's happening when users are using your app, if you don't know that crashes are happening in the real world, you don't know why you might be getting 1-star reviews.
Right. All right. So when you develop with Android Studio, do you use like the beta version, the stable version, the canary version, dev version?
I usually have 2 installed side by side. I usually have a stable with a canary side by side. If canary breaks stuff for any reason, I don't have to spend half a day uninstalling and reinstalling and getting everything configured again. I've just got an immediate fallback so I don't waste time.
When you actually code, do you actually listen to music, white noise? Do you listen to anything, or like do you prefer like silence?
Yeah, I rock out.
Oh, yeah.
I like it loud.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So what's one cool Android Studio shortcut that's a little different, but like you just keep using a lot that you think our listeners should probably be aware of?
I'm sure there are some much more subtle ones, but one I use quite a lot, or a number that I use quite a lot, is the option command something, which is extract a field or extract a constant. Just refactoring code that just speeds it up so much.
And one thing you wish Android had but doesn't necessarily have currently?
I think a big one, I'm going to go Android Wear. I think Android Wear really needs NFC support.
Oh,
because
interesting. Okay.
Currently Apple leads for NFC payments on.
That is true. Apple Pay's thing is pretty slick.
And you can pay with your watch.
Yeah. Okay, so if the folks at Google are listening, Mark has spoken. Thank you so much, Mark. I hope you have a great I.O.
Thank you.
My name is Jake Wharton. I work at Square on the Square Cash app.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he is a real person in the flesh. All right, so what's the most exciting announcement that you heard at I.O.?
I think the Google Home demo is one that is very compelling, and Google is a company that has a lot of my data already. And so the unification of that into something that is not only able to search all of Google's web stuff is as powerful as Google Search, but also within all my documents, my appointments, my emails, all that stuff, and integrate it into something that's essentially hands-free and can control my also my things around my house.
Nice.
I think that's that as a unified product is extremely compelling to me.
I mean, given that we are Android developers and we've already sold our souls, it's about time they actually make use of the data now, right?
Yes, please.
Fragments, yay or nay?
Nay.
Nay?
Enough said.
Brilliant. Okay. What's the last Android application that you can remember that you used in your phone that actually blew your mind? When you used the application, you thought, okay, like these gals or guys know what they're doing.
So I'm going to cheat a little on this one. I, for the first time, used a feature of applications that blew my mind.
Oh, okay.
The Uber Pool and the Lyft line. I used those for the first time over the past week. Just the technical prowess that goes into real-time finding, ride-sharing of people traveling in relatively the same direction, and having it work and also save me money as a result it kind of blew my mind that we're at that stage where it's just a really impressive technical problem and a really impressive technical solution.
Right. So, I mean, was like the fascination in that knowing that this is like a hard problem, like the whole like graphing theory and stuff, and then how they managed to solve that in a way that works for us?
Yeah, exactly. It feels, it's very real time. And the interesting aspect is when you're already, you don't set up a trip in advance. When you're already in the middle of a trip, people might be joining and leaving at any time. And so just the fact that it's not a simple like request a ride, that it's this real-time thing that happens over the lifetime of the trip and has to deal with geographical positioning and forecasting is just really impressive.
All right. What are three... This question is good. What are three external libraries that you cannot start an app without?
Does external mean not first party, as in not Google,
Yes,
or not?
not Google.
Okay, so I can use ones that may just happen to have been authored by
Happen to be authored by this person whose name starts with J.
So I can pick these two because I am not the primary author. And I think OKHTP kind of is a very fundamental part of an application.
That's true.
You can live without, but it's challenging. I'm going to say retrofit.
This is hard, isn't it?
I'm going to say retrofit. However, Bob Lee is the author of retrofit. I just merely haven't.
Nice save.
Yeah. Beyond that, if the question's if I'm starting a new application. So to follow up my fragments answer, I think the Conductor library, which is one that's come out recently, to serve as kind of a view composition framework to deal with the whole backstack problem. We have our own solutions, which they're either internal and kind of specialized, or I don't find them to be adequate enough to really solve the problem. And I think Conductor is not perfect, but I think it solves it in a really nice way. So I wouldn't be able to create an app with more than one screen without something like Conductor.
Cool. Just to be clear, so you would never use RxJava. Like you're just totally hating.
Damn, I forgot about that.
No, but I guess you would prefer Agera to that, right?
Oh, no comment.
So, what do you use? So, when you actually code, do you use like Android Studio Beta, Canary, Dev, Stable? Which ones do you use?
So I usually try and stay on the beta.
Okay.
However, with today's announcement of 2.2, the preview, and it being based on IntelliJ 2016, IntelliJ 2016 is the first version of IntelliJ that runs on Java 8. And we're actually working on IDE plugins, and we're currently having some difficulties dealing with Java 6 support for supporting Android Studio. So now that Android Studio 2.2 has Java 8, we can get rid of all that old crappy Java 6 and update these plugins to Java 8. So for that, I think I will switch back to the latest Canary until it stabilizes again, and then I'll probably fall back into beta.
When you actually code, do you listen to like music, white noise?
So I definitely music, but I have a habit of putting something on say Spotify, and getting really in the zone and writing a lot of code, and I'll go and I'll look back and I'll just have listened to the same CD about 8 times over and over again. So it essentially turns into white noise, but it's always I'm always trying to find something that's consistent and not loud enough screaming in my ear so that it lets me fall into that zone.
The zone. So it gets to a point where it isn't necessarily distracting anymore.
Yeah. Although sometimes I feel bad because I really want to listen to an album, and I've listened to it about 20 times, but I just really can't remember a single song from it.
So what's one cool Android Studio shortcut that you think our listeners may not necessarily know that you think people should use?
I'm going to say the convert to Kotlin shortcut as kind of a leading way to hopefully get more people interested in the language. I actually have no idea what the shortcut is. It's some crazy 4-key combination thing.
Okay. You can always just remap it to something.
Yeah. Command K.
Command K. Boom. There you go. And for folks who don't know, yesterday Jake did give a talk at Realm, Kotlin Night. So pretty good talk. So when that's out, definitely we'll add a link to that as well. All right. So what's one thing you wish Android had but doesn't?
Okay. I told that I would do this ahead of time, but I have kind of a habit of using questions like this to throw a little shade towards people.
This is the best opportunity to do
yes,
that.
everyone.
This is exactly what people are looking forward to.
So the Java 8 stuff coming in N is fantastic. A lot of APIs that have been missing for Android for a long time. But the Java Time API is noticeably absent from the end developer.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, and Java Util Date, Java Util Calendar are
the fantastic,
super well designed, mutable classes that everyone loves. So I would really love to see that added for the final release, because it really kind of rounds out the high hitting features of what Java 8 brought.
I never even thought about that, but yeah, now that I think about it, I'm like, oh my god, they totally should be adding that and backporting it if possible, right?
Sure. Yeah, it definitely could exist as a standalone library, as have been proved by the 310 library.
Thank you so much, Jake. Have an amazing rest of the I/O.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, yes, indeed.
My name is Ryan Harter. I'm an Android GDE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don keeps rubbing that. So.
I've heard. So I'm a freelance Android developer out of Chicago. I work for lots of different clients. I also work with a startup called PicSite. We make Fragment as our big app right now. We're working on some new ones. But we do like photo editing apps, OpenGL based stuff. And so I'm working on bringing that up to the full-time work.
Was Fragment an intentionally chosen name? Was that something that you felt needed to be there, or was it naturally a name that evolved?
No, that one actually it came out on iOS first. Yeah, and so they called it that, and it was named after like the main artistic style of the app. Had nothing to do with Android Fragments, but it does make Googling really hard.
Okay, so this is like an excellent segue for a question that I had later. But so Fragments, yay or nay?
What's right in between yay and nay? Like I'm
well, you can't do that.
I'm honestly like really indifferent. I use them sometimes. Sometimes I don't. I try to, if there's stuff I have to do like view pagers or that kind of stuff where I need to like save state and all of that, and like restoring state. Since the framework's kind of made for it, I use them. Otherwise, I mostly use views and activities when I can.
I'm curious what you would call it. Like, so in the Fragment app, if you used a fragment, would you call that fragment something fragment?
Yeah, I definitely have a fragment edit fragment.
Okay, perfect.
And fragment store fragment. Those all exist, yeah.
I'm sure everyone who's working on that app loves those names.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the most exciting announcement that you heard at I.O.?
I think the Google Assistant, definitely. Just the idea of tying all that information together, and also the home automation is something that I've really been interested in. I've got, I think, like 4 or 5 Chromecasts, a couple just for audio for my home audio system.
Oh, wow.
For the TVs around the house. And I've got Nest, like all of that. To be able to control that from anywhere is really appealing to me.
Nice. So what's the last Android application that you use on your phone that you thought blew your mind? Like, this is like an application you thought was amazing.
The Pocket Cast material update, that was amazing. They did a really good job of kind of materializing everything and making a really good experience with that app. So like purely from a design perspective, like that was sort of the big one for me.
Nice. I'm basically their personal chauffeur for the whole week, so I'll let them know. Maybe they'll give me an extra tip or something.
Nice, very good.
So if you were starting an app from scratch, what are 3 external dependencies or libraries that you would totally add? Or what are 3 libraries you feel that you would never start an app without?
So definitely Retrofit and OKHTTP are 2 that I kind of always use. And so that's, I don't know if that's 2 or 1.
If you do add retrofit, like OKHTTP is a dependency, so I guess you can say that's
I do use OKHTTP independently quite a bit, and I've actually been using, so for my photo stuff, I interact with files on the file system a lot.
Oh, right.
And so I've been using OKIO for that type of buffering and all that stuff, which has been really nice. So basically everything from those guys. I've been using
those guys. Yeah.
You know who I speak of. But I've been using RxJava quite a bit lately, which is really nice. And the other one that I've been using a lot lately over the past year or so is AutoValue.
You do have something with AutoValue out, right?
Yeah, so almost a year ago and released like a month ago. So I wrote extension support for AutoValue, and then I've got a bunch of extensions for things like parcelable and all of that. So I use AutoValue for most of like my model classes and immutable value types, and then can easily make them parcelable. Use them with Moshi, which is another library that I always use.
A lot of Jesse love here. I like.
Yeah. It sounds weird when you phrase it that way, but yeah.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, probably have to change that post edit. Okay, cool. So when you actually code, you use Android Studios, like Canary version, beta, stable, dev.
Yeah, so I go back and forth between beta and Canary. Anytime they announce something cool like Instant Run, which that works really well for some things. For my graphics things, where I'm doing like changes in the render cycle, It works really well for me. So I switched to Canary when I needed to for that. The Android 2.2, I'll be switching to Canary, and then I'll go back to beta after a while.
So along those lines, do you have like a tip for our listeners that you think would be like that most listeners don't know or like wouldn't know that you think is amazing that we should?
Yeah, so I actually learned about this yesterday. But when you're in the debugger, when you're at a breakpoint, you can hit Alt F8, and that brings up the expression evaluator, I guess, which is cool. And I knew about that for a long time. That lets you like evaluate one-line expressions. But there's a button at the bottom of it that you can change it to code blocks, and so you can copy and paste entire code blocks out, and you have your debugger state. And so for me, again, with the graphics stuff, that's really helpful when I'm doing like matrix transformations, so I can actually step through entire blocks of code.
There's a lot of like hidden gems in that debugger window. Do you listen to any music or anything like when you actually code, or silence?
I kind of do both. I usually start up some music in the morning, and then I get in the zone, and the album runs out, and I don't notice. So I just keep going through silence for the rest of the day.
What's the last biggest annoying thing that you can remember when dealing with Android?
I think instant run, like going back to that, instant run tends to get into like these weird states where it thinks nothing has changed, so you try to run or try to debug, and it won't actually push any changes to the device and that kind of stuff. It takes some inside knowledge to recognize that scenario and get yourself out of it.
Totally. In fact, I think that like that's an issue I've been running into as well. Like sometimes it doesn't, like the hot swapping doesn't work as well as it's supposed to, and then I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure I changed the class. But,
exactly. And then I end up like, I don't know, changing something, putting in some line of code that won't do anything, just so it'll kind of refresh the class.
Almost like the git sort of like commit when you need to like kick a build or something that's like written, right? Okay. And the last question: if there was one thing you wish Android had, what would it be?
So one of the issues that we've run into with Fragment started out as a paid app, and we want to move to free. But one of the challenges is with the Play Store, you can't get like receipt data beyond in-app purchases. So if we go to free and we put a watermark on your image, for instance, and then you can remove that, with an in-app purchase, we have no way to know if somebody purchased the app already, so that we can remove the watermark for them because they already paid. And so all of the ways to work around that, put something in shared preferences, like all of that kind of stuff. That doesn't survive a reinstall. Like there's really like no good way to work around this. Interesting. So that's sort of on the like Play Store side, but that's the biggest thing that I'd like to see is more support for purchase tracking.
Love that answer. Thank you so much, Ryan. This was amazing. I hope you have an amazing rest of this I/O.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, so I am here with someone who's in some circles called the double binding magician, unleasher of double binding powers. So could you just tell us like who you are, where you work, and stuff that you're interested in?
My name is Lisa Wray, and I work at a startup called Genius.
Nice. And what does Genius do?
We are a music knowledge project. Our main focus is song lyrics, and we crowdsource explanations for them, which we call annotations.
Nice. I asked this question because I actually know what Genius is, but like I was listening to a podcast some time back, and they actually talked about how Genius has like grown to stuff beyond just like music, right? Like they do a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's pretty cool.
Music is our main focus, but we've expanded to allow people to annotate any web page. So people have begun using it on all kinds of content, including news and technical articles and poetry and literature. So yeah, it's gotten a lot bigger than music, but that's definitely where we started and where our focus is.
So what was the most exciting announcement that you heard at I/O today?
Well, the most exciting announcement is that Instant Run is 10 times faster than it was before.
Yeah.
As an Android developer, the number one thing I do all day is build and run my app. And that is by far the most important thing to me. Unfortunately, I missed the first half of the tools session, but the second half was awesome.
Yeah. Those guys are rock stars. They did a pretty good job.
They're my favorite people.
So, fragments, yay or nay?
So, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I personally am a big fan of fragments. I was developing before they existed, when it was activities. And I think they're an important and fairly easy tool. I know it's easy to get confused with the life cycle, but overall, they've made my life a lot better.
Okay. Oh no, perfect. Yeah, and this is why I like this question because there's people are on the strong yes or no. So
I'm not a strong yes, but I use them in every app I make. So
Oh, that makes sense. What was the last Android application that you used on your phone that you thought like really blew your mind?
So the answer to this is kind of funny. It's not really a technical question, but I was using the Uber app this weekend, and it prompted me to enter my address. I was surprised because normally it doesn't make you do that until the driver shows up. And it pops up this dialogue saying, we're asking you to enter your address because your driver is deaf or hard of hearing. So when we'll put your address in for you, and then we'll give him turn-by-turn directions. So I didn't have to try and talk to him. I thought that was a really cool example of how you can make your app enable new ways for people to interact with each other, or that wouldn't have been possible before.
That is fantastic. I've never actually seen that happen. Oh, that
was the first time for me also. But yeah, I thought it was amazing they do that.
Yeah, kudos to the Uber team. That's fantastic. I love that. If you were starting a new Android application, like what are 3 libraries, what are 3 external dependencies that you feel you wouldn't want to start an application without?
So first, a good networking library. Okay, HTTP is probably the one I usually use. On top of that, I've just fallen in love with Retrofit. That's a big thing for me. But I'd kind of lump them together.
Okay.
After that, a good image loading library.
Ooh.
Lately, I'm using Glide. I've also used Picasso. I've also used Volley.
Right.
I'd definitely use one of them.
Okay.
And then finally, you need a good deserializer probably from JSON. Right now I'm using JSON and it's pretty good. I've also used Jackson.
Okay.
But yeah, I think every application I've made has all of those things.
Okay.
So they're definitely in my starting toolkit.
You said you use Android Studio on a daily basis, right? So like, what version do you use? Do you use like beta, developer, canary, stable?
I run the canary version and I develop my production application on it.
Okay.
And now that's partly because I'm the only Android developer, so I don't have to worry so much about consistent builds, or if something breaks, I can just uninstall it, and I've only screwed up my own workflow.
Right.
But in all honesty, I started doing it kind of on a lark, and I've found that even the canary build is stable enough that I haven't needed to revert.
Absolutely.
Granted, I see bugs, but I also get to try the new things first. Right. So yeah, canary all the way so far.
I'm pretty much the same way too. Like initially I was like trying to be a little more responsible in that I have like a stable version, but then I was like, you know what, I really want to try those pretty cool features, and like, you know, what's the worst that could happen?
Right. And it's funny, you were joking about it, but data binding was the reason I did it, because after last I/O, it was in beta for a long time, and since it's so integrated with the build process, the only way to use it was to run the latest canary, the latest beta version of Gradle or whatever, and then the beta version of data binding. So that's how I got into it, and then I couldn't go back.
Yeah, that's how they get you. So when you actually code, right, do you listen to like white noise, music, birds chirping like this, or like, I mean, do you listen to anything at all, or do you prefer silence?
So it's funny for someone who works at a music company, but I'm one of those people who becomes very, very deep in their flow of concentration, and I generally just prefer silence.
Okay.
But I do work in an office with other people, so sometimes I'll put on headphones and just crank up the music to drown them out. And this last week, it's been Lemonade on repeat over and over.
Good choice there. Can't go wrong. What's one cool Android Studio shortcut that you feel our listeners may not necessarily be aware of, that you think is like pretty cool, that you probably should be using?
It's a good question, because I aspire to be an expert on Android Studio tricks, but I probably don't know anything groundbreaking. My favorite one is I've discovered you can move classes from one place to another.
Yeah, no, the refactoring, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
You can generate tests. Everyone should do that. But honestly, if you're looking for a cool trick, then you should do what I have to do, which is go rewatch the Android Dev Summit where the tools guys talk about it. It's basically an hour of magical things Android Studio does.
Right. And I think they have like another expert session or something today, right? So hopefully we'll have another sort of like bout of that thing.
Oh yeah, I watched it and I was just like, this is magic. This is amazing. Unfortunately, I'm too lazy to remember most of them, but I learned like a new one every week.
I guess we're pretty much all the same way. What was the last bug or sort of like ordeal that you can remember having dealt with Android development?
Oh boy. Most of my worst bugs have been strange problems around media playback. It's a bit of a mystery for me because I don't have any background in it.
Okay.
And I think it's a bit of a specialty. So it's not like there's a million articles on it, like Fragments or how to load an image. But particularly, I have a weird bug I still haven't fixed yet, which I think is happening because some manufacturer added code.
Some manufacturer.
I'm actually not sure it's Samsung yet.
Okay.
Because it's a small percentage.
Okay.
If it was a large percentage, I would blame Samsung. But yeah, so that's going to be my ordeal for the week after I/O.
Okay. If Android had one thing, what would you hope that it would be?
So not strictly Android framework, but I would love to see an Android emulator with the Play Store, like a fully functioning Play Store.
Oh, okay.
Because it's difficult to do testing of. The one that got me is that we have YouTube video playback, so that requires the YouTube app.
Oh, right,
So
right.
I was actually able to get it working. It was fairly easy, but I had to go download the YouTube app, sideload the APK onto the emulator, and at that point I was like, why can't I have the full experience? And so I think the Android emulator used to be very difficult. In like the last year, I've been able to use it seriously as a development tool.
Very true.
As a development tool, and also even to give demos, because it's become faster and responsive enough, which is amazing. Look forward to more improvements there.
That's
But-
wink, hint, yeah.
But yeah, it's still missing some things, and the Play Store would be a huge help, because you could truly test how apps interact with each other, and that interactivity is such a huge part of the Android ecosystem.
Lisa, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you have a great I/O.
Thank you.
All the way from Africa, I have this amazing GDE developer with me. Can you tell us who you are, where you work, and what you do?
I'm Rebecca Franks. I work at a company called DSTV, where we do media streaming applications, mainly focusing on Android development for them. So live streaming of live sports, movies, series, that kind of thing.
Oh, pretty sweet. You told me something interesting when you came here. You said like everyone seems to be driving on the wrong side of the road. That's pretty cool. Was that difficult?
Yeah, so I actually didn't want to drive here. I'm a little bit nervous.
Okay.
Also, like crossing the street, I might get killed because I'm looking the wrong way. It's a little bit different.
Okay. So here's the trick though. Here, like nobody knows how to drive. Everyone just uses Uber or Lyft. So like that way, it's pretty safe. So
Yeah, I've done that too.
What was the most exciting announcement that you heard at I/O?
So I actually have two. I think the best one for me is the Google Home. I can't wait to get one of those little speakers in my house.
Oh yeah.
I think it'll work really well because of all the search capabilities that they already have. So Google Now works really well. So I imagine the speaker will work well. And then also the new tools in the Android Studio. So the ability to like record your tests and run them back without writing any espresso code. That's really cool. And then also the new layout editor. Haven't had a chance to try it, but I'm hoping for the best.
Okay, yeah. Those are amazing announcements. Okay, so Fragments, yay or nay?
I think I'll give a meh as a response.
Okay. That is the correct response.
Yeah. I've been burnt a couple of times with weird crashes, and
we all have.
yeah, you get the hang of them a little bit. We're actually trying to minimize the amount that we have in our apps, but we do use them. Only for really special cases, though, when we need to.
Okay, that makes sense. So what was the last application that you used, Android application that you thought like blew your mind?
So it's actually a local app based from South Africa.
Oh, very nice.
It's called 22/7. It's a financial tracking app. So you link all your different accounts that you have in different banks, and it gives you like expense tracking and tells you how much you're spending in different areas of your life, like
very cool.
holiday, travel, stuff like that.
Okay.
And the app is actually really nice, and I was actually quite surprised at how cool it is. So yeah, a local app.
Nice, very nice. So shout out to the folks at 22/7. You said? Okay, 22/7. Great job. All right, so if you were starting like this brand new application, Android application, what 3 external dependencies or libraries would you pick?
Okay, so I think it's probably the standard answer of retrofit, OK HTTP, and all the passes around it.
Okay.
And then I would include all the Android espresso testing ones.
Ah, nice. Okay. I'm presuming you use Android Studio. So which version do you use? Do you use like stable, beta, canary? development release?
So I've actually got both installed, so the stable and beta. I mainly use beta until I run into a problem, and then I switch back to the stable one. But at least I have both of them running concurrently.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking about Android Studio, what was one shortcut? What is one Android Studio shortcut that you think is pretty cool that our listeners should basically use?
People are probably going to hate me for this one, but I'm not really a user of shortcuts.
Interesting. Okay. No, that's
Control
fine.
space bar is probably, or command space is probably the most used for me.
Okay. Okay.
And then the search everywhere. But yeah, other than that, probably type more than anyone else.
No, okay. Oh, that's fair. That's totally fair. So when you actually code, do you listen to like music? Do you listen to like white noise? Do you prefer to code in silence?
So actually, I can't really concentrate when there's music with words playing.
Right. Okay.
Because then I try to sing along with it. So probably just nothing.
Okay.
Don't really listen to any music. If it's easy coding, then I can. But if I'm trying to get too technical, then I have to turn it off. Otherwise, I'm distracted.
Okay. What is one bug or like sort of ordeal that you last faced when you dealt with Android development?
So we actually had a very interesting bug where, I mean, it wasn't the last bug, but it was an interesting one.
Okay. Even better. Yeah.
Where we were dealing with time zones. So the problem was we actually weren't really dealing with them.
Okay.
So, yeah, a little bit.
Been there. Definitely been there. Yeah.
So we had the server sending back dates of certain things that had happened, and users that had a certain time zone set on their phone would try to get this data back from the server, and the hour that the time was set for was non-existent in that time zone due to, I think it's daylight savings or something. I don't know, we don't have that in South Africa.
So we drive on the wrong side of the road. We don't know how to keep time. Wow, okay, fantastic.
Yeah, so it was only like happening for a small percentage of users that had that specific time zone set.
Okay.
So it was quite a hard one to track down, but when we found it out, we were actually quite amused.
In my previous company, we worked at that built apps for weddings.
Yeah.
And so we had this feature where we had to like track event details.
Yeah.
And getting the time zones right was tricky because the problem is if you get it wrong, people will not forgive you if you were the reason for like their guests missing their wedding. So lesson learned in a very hard way.
I can imagine. I think we should just get rid of time zones and all just have one time.
I know. I think people have, it would be easy for developers at least. Definitely.
Nobody else but us.
Yeah. Okay, so what's one thing you wish Android had but doesn't?
So I think the one thing I would prefer more of is a little bit more documentation. So especially around best practices and guidance as to how you should structure your app.
True. Right.
I think as like a newbie Android developer, when you approach the website, it's a little bit difficult to sort of structure, and you just sort of throw everything into an activity and then it just keeps getting bigger. So I think maybe just a little bit more guidance around that would be good.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I hope you have an amazing... Oh, actually, one last question. So your Twitter handle is Rigaru. What's the story behind that?
It's not a really funny story, actually. It's really lame. But
favorite developers, that's enough.
When I was little, my sister couldn't pronounce the word Rebecca.
Oh.
So she was just like, Rigs.
Okay.
And then from then on, it just sort of went into Rigaroo.
Oh, that's a sweet story. Yeah. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Rigaroo. Okay. Nice.
So it's just a name on the internet.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I hope you have an amazing rest of this I/O.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me.
You actually have a dark past, I've heard.
Yes.
Yes, you were in the land of PHP.
Yes,
so
I was actually teaching web development in PHP at university level.
Okay.
So this was back in the late 90s. You know, when PHP was the thing.
Okay. But you have chosen the light now.
Yeah. I very, very quickly after that I switched over to the Java side. So then I've been staying on that correct path for now.
Fantastic. So could you tell us like who you are, where you work now, and what you do?
Yeah. So my name is Erik. I live in Stockholm in Sweden. I'm an Android GDE. I worked mostly with Android. I've been doing that for 8 years, so pretty much since start.
Okay.
I started with it working for Sony Mobile, or Sony Ericsson as it was called then, doing their, integrating the Android into the devices we were building at that time.
Okay.
Moved it a little bit, and I worked for Spotify, and now I'm freelancing. So
very cool.
I'm working as a freelance Android developer in Sweden.
Very nice. So what was the most exciting announcement you heard at I.O., either today or yesterday?
Yeah, for me as an Android developer, I think that the test recording that they added to Android Studio, that's that blew me away. I was like, wow, this is like... Now there's no excuse anymore for anyone not to test.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the part that people love. It's like they've made it so easy. There's no reason now.
Yeah, and I mean this was just the first preview that we saw there. So like even if it's not perfect, having something like this from the start is like amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure that's like a pretty hot topic. All right. So fragments, yay or nay?
Yeah, I'm actually positive to fragments, but you have to understand how they work.
Right.
I mean, one of the most common bugs I have is the state loss thing when you someone pops up a dialogue and that so that one and that usually comes because people are not really comfortable with the APIs. But that goes back to the problem that anything that is async, people have
a problem.
Yeah,
in general. That's true. So, what was the last Android application that you used on your phone that you thought like blew your mind? That was like an amazing application.
Oh yeah, I have to pitch about Taylor Ling's Fabulous app.
Oh, Taylor Ling is a good friend of the show. Yeah.
Yes. Taylor Ling made an app. It's been out for a while now called Fabulous. If you haven't checked it out, you should do it. This is the best designed app I have ever seen in my life.
Ooh.
So so it's like one of these getting better, what do you call, habits in your life. Like you should drink water properly. I want to get, exercise. It helps you with this one. But the design and the user experience is so perfect, I would have to say. That's just amazing.
Shout out to our good friend, Taylor Ling.
Yes.
So if you were starting an app from scratch, what 3 libraries would you use or pull?
Yeah, so me, being a quite experienced Android developer, having done this for a while, I tend to pick like we all pick like the Square libraries or Retrofit and OKHP like that. So let's leave those out for now. But yeah, I'll probably pick them. But something I would also like to start with now is more of the auto value. Now that we got a new one, because I like anything that's generated. That's good. Generate the code. I don't want to write the code. The less code I write, the better it is. And after that, also I would say Dagger. I would use that one.
Absolutely.
The support libraries are always good. Of course, you need those. And then Retrofit for the networking stack.
Right.
So yeah, that wasn't 3, but let's say Retrofit, Auto Value, and Dagger.
That's a solid combination there.
Yeah.
When you use Android Studio, what version do you use? Do you use like beta, stable, dev?
Yeah, well, I actually have all 3 installed all at the same time.
Interesting.
Since I'm a freelancer, now I'm working on multiple projects actually with different clients, and sometimes I need to run a certain version because reasons. So I always have the stable one installed, and then I always have like the Canary as another installation. So I run all of them.
Oh, pretty cool. Speaking about Android Studio, what is like one Android Studio keyboard shortcut that you think people should know, or like that is pretty common?
Yeah, so the context selection that you can expand, like when you press Alt and arrow up
that's
to expand your selection.
Right.
That one is something that is so amazing. I use that a lot, especially in combination with extracting methods and stuff like that. Press Alt and then arrow
up or down, and it increases and decreases.
Yeah, it's an amazing feature actually.
Yeah, that is a fantastic thing. When you actually code, do you listen to like music, white noise, or do you prefer silence? Like how do you code?
It varies a lot. I usually start the day with nothing because we talk a lot in the office.
Right.
And then as we the day progresses, I usually listen to music, and there either I listen to like this mood music that's focus music or calming music or something like that.
Right.
Or I go into my like heavy metal rock music thing that I listen to mostly.
Interesting. So wide variety there.
Yeah, pretty much actually.
That's pretty cool. When dealing with Android, what was the last bug or like sort of ordeal that you can remember having dealt with Android?
Yeah, so one thing that I realized is a common problem and that I keep running into, it's about concurrency and multi-threading and stuff like that. And I noticed this because like lots of developers, even experienced developers, have a hard time with threads.
Yeah,
and
is always tricky. Yeah,
and so there is the bugs that I run into most recently as well. So it's like I still find like people, developers with lots of experience, they extend the thread class and use that one.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's not.
And this is very common, especially among older Java developers who are new to Android. They come from maybe the Java Enterprise domains and haven't used threads much, and so. Right. But it's a common problem, and this is actually one of the most recent things I've seen.
Okay.
So threading in general.
Okay, pretty cool. Thank you so much, Erik, for your time. It's amazing chatting with you and catching up with you in person. Yeah. I hope you have an amazing rest of this I/O.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this Google I/O special. Make sure you check the show notes at fragmentedpodcast.com/episodes/42, and you'll find the Twitter handles for some of these amazing guests, so you can follow them and see the other great things that they have to say. We've also tried to add mentions of the apps that some of these folks picked as their choice. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and stay tuned because we're going to release part 2 pretty shortly.
I had an answer for this. I totally forgot what it was.
I'm guessing the glass of beer has something to do with like the memory sort of.
Well, you told Ryan and I that you were going to ask 5 questions, and that was about 20.
You realize I can totally edit this out, right? So, like this is all never going to make it to.